Good afternoon. Rich Nass here with Open Systems Media, leader of the company's embedded franchise, here for my weekly chat with our friend and neighbor, Ray Zinn. Hello, Ray. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for asking, Rich.
Good. You are welcome. Okay, so as you know, because I know you listen to these things every week, Ray is the former CEO of Micrel. He was there for a very long time, something like 37 years. He's also an author and a podcaster, and he is a very honest answer when I ask him these questions. So I like asking some tough questions because he always tells me the truth. So this week's question has to do with China. They, over the last, I'll say decade, but I'll let you define that better, Ray, they have been eating into our electronics industry. Is this something that we in the U.S. should be concerned about? And if so, what should we do about it?
Well, I think it's been since the downturn in 2001 is when they started taking a real interest, because that's when many of the manufacturers in the U.S. moved to contract manufacturing in Asia. And China, of course, wanted a piece of that action because they got the technology, and they would get the technology and also have that insight into what these U.S. companies were doing. And so I think it's twofold, a little bit of espionage, as you would, and also they wanted to get a foothold in consumer electronics. That's one of their goals and objectives. So, yes, I would say it's definitely true.
But the perception is that the quality is not there. So A, is perception reality? And, I mean, what do you do about that?
Well, you know, Japan had the same issue back after the Second World War when we were trying to help Japan rebuild its nation. And, you know, we used to make jokes about, the Japanese quality, and they focused heavily on that and were ultimately able to produce some of the finest products that we know today. So I think you have the same kind of issue in China where, you know, they're relatively new at this manufacturing process, and they will work the bugs out over time. And they have that stated objective. The thing that I think we should be concerned about is this intellectual property issue where they have no problems copying the intellectual property. I think that's the bigger issue going forward.
So did you outsource to them when you were at Micrel?
We did a couple of projects like that, but I was concerned about it, so we minimized it. I can only think of one or two projects over the past 15 years or 14 years that we did with China.
And were you happy with the results?
It was okay. I mean, it's hard to say how successful it was because we actually stopped the project. Now, we had a design group over in China, which had me concerned. We had about 12, 15 people over there, and we watched it very closely because I was very concerned about them getting their hands on the country itself, getting their hands on the product. So we watched it like a hawk. We had some safety measures that we implemented, or at least we could get a warning if, in fact, they were taking the technology.
Did you ever have any issues like that?
Not that I can say specifically that I did. It was, again, we were watching it pretty carefully, and so I think that we were safeguarded well enough that it made it more difficult for them to do it. We weren't. They didn't have the whole data set. They only had part of it, and so when they did the design, it was more or less we had part of it and they had part of it. So we try to keep the keys locked up.
So I guess the real answer, or the real question I should be asking, would you do it over again the same way, or would you still deal with the folks in China the same way if you had to do it all over again?
Well, these are good people. I mean, I'm not going to discount that. I mean, just because the Chinese government has a more of a selfish view of what they would like to have, the people themselves are pretty honest and pretty good people, and so I think that I'd still do it. I think.
That's not a definite positively. I definitely will.
No, it's a definite. I think I would. I'm not denigrating them. The quality of their product, quality of their output is good, and they are lower cost. But I am cautious. I am reticent about just opening up the floodgates.
Okay, fair enough. It sounds like the answer is yes, I do it, but just go very slowly and be very careful.
Yes, because there's a stated view that they do want our technology. There's no question about it.
Right. Okay. All righty. I think that wraps up this week's session. I thank you, Ray. That was Ray Zinn, the longtime former CEO of Micrel, and the man with the honest answers. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Rich. Good talking to you.
Same here. Bye-bye.